guys, today I'm going to be showing y'all how I'm repairing the dent in my trunk using a body filler called Bondo. So what I'm using to repair the trunk is the body filler, of course, 400 grit sandpaper, a plastic spreader to spread the body filler, primer, 40, 80, and 180 grit sandpaper, and some masking tape. Then I also ordered a kit from eBay for my base coat, which comes with clear coat. Then it also came with a tack cloth, and then it came with more sandpaper, and of course gather your newspaper for paint. Okay, the first thing I'm doing right now is I'm washing the trunk so I can remove all dust and bird poop and bugs that may be on the trunk so it doesn't get in the way of sanding. So I'm just using basic soap and water. I think I used Dawn. Give it a good scrub for like a minute or two. Then I just rinse it off with some water. Once I finish washing the trunk from all the debris, I take, I think it was 80 grit sandpaper. Yes, 80 grit sandpaper. I take that and I sand down the trunk, sand the clear coat, sand down the base coat, sand down the primer, all the way until it reaches the metal of the car. I want to expose the metal of the car because the body filler, it attaches itself better once it's on the body or the metal part of the trunk. So this process takes a little while. So I'm going to speed up the video. Right here I had switched out from 80 grit to 40 grit sandpaper because the 40 grit was cutting down to the metal a little bit quicker than the 80 grit was. Once I finish the sanding process, I just take soap and water again and wash away the debris that was caused by sanding. So what I'm doing right here is I'm going back over the trunk with 40 grit sandpaper. I'm just making sure that I'm hitting the spots that I missed or that I thought I missed. I'm trying to get the metal of the trunk to be fully exposed so the body filler can successfully adhere to the surface of the trunk. Because we want that body filler to stay on the trunk as long as the car exists, basically. After I'm done sanding, I go back over the trunk with some soap and water, just giving it a quick wash down to remove all of the debris that was caused from sanding. Then I give it a quick rinse, and then I let it air dry for 10 to 20 minutes. So right here I'm making sure that the trunk is free from all the sandpaper debris. And by using an old dustpan and the plastic spreader, I'm mixing together the body filler and the hardening cream together, getting it prepared to be spreaded onto the trunk. So at first I'm just taking a little bit at a time and spreading on a thin layer at first. Just a fair warning, I really have no experience in using body filler in large areas like this, so take what I'm doing with a grain of salt, but I'm just doing this for me, what I think is going to work for me. So yeah, I'm just trying to evenly spread this as much as I can. with a very thin layer. And I'm also trying to hurry because this stuff hardens pretty quickly. So I'm trying to rush through the process as well. So after the first layer has completely dried, I'm adding an additional layer of body filler. And I know this looks janky and uneven and all types of messed up, but I've never used body filler at this level before, so I'm not proficient at it at all. Like I said, take what I'm doing with a grain of salt, because I am not a professional at this stuff. And I'm just adding more Bondo, another layer, until it's like even to the rest of the trunk. So right here I'm taking some, I think this is 40 grit sandpaper. I'm taking the 40 grit sandpaper to make the body filler a little bit smoother. And I'm also removing excessive body filler that I might have put onto the trunk. As you can see, there's like a lot of uneven spots and little hiccups that I've done on the trunk, and I'm trying to smooth all of that out before I move on. And the 40 grit sandpaper removes everything almost. I mean, I used it to sand down the paint to the metal of the car. I didn't get this on video, but I had sanded down the top half of the trunk, circled in red. I sanded that down just as I did the bottom half of the trunk. And so what I'm doing right here is I'm getting ready to apply the body filler to the top half of the trunk as well. So I'm applying a very thin layer of the body filler just as I did the lower half of the trunk. I'm also trying to hurry because this stuff dries extremely fast, but I'm also trying to take my time so I don't have any more mess ups and have big globs where I have to take a lot of sandpaper and sand down the whole thing again. So right here I messed up and I added a little too much body filler. So I'm using 40 grit sandpaper again to smooth out the body filler so it's even with the surface of the trunk. So this process takes a little while. I think it took me like 5 to 10 minutes to sand down all of that body filler. So it's very important that you make sure that the body filler is smoothed out completely so you don't have to go through this process like I did. So now I'm taking soap and water and I'm just washing away the sanded down particles of the body filler. So right here I'm just adding another layer of body filler to the trunk. I repeat this process over and over until the body filler is relatively even with the rest of the trunk area. After the body filler has dried, I take 40 grit sandpaper and I go back over the trunk to smooth out the imperfections. And this process takes a little while as well. That's why it's very imperative that you smooth out the body filler when you're first applying it so you don't have to go back and resand and then add more body filler and repeat, because it's a pain in the rear. So basically I'm just applying body filler, sanding down that body filler, washing away the sanded body filler particles, just repeating that process throughout the entirety of this project. So using 180 grit sandpaper, I'm just smoothing down the body filler. I'm just getting those fine lines and small holes smoothed down for getting prepared for primer for the painting process. So I'm just trying to get the body filler as smooth as possible. So right here I'm using 400 grit sandpaper that came with the painting kit. This just smooths down the body filler even more. And just like Pain and Misery, you just wash all that body filler mess away. And here is the finished product. See how nice and even and smooth it looks? Now granted, there may be some small blemishes here and there, but they're hardly noticeable unless you're really looking. So now I start on the painting process. So I'm just adding newspaper around the trunk area so I can prevent overspray and have a direct area where I want the spray paint to go. Now I'll start the priming process. So I'm applying the primer in a very light coat because you don't want to apply a heavy coat of primer on your very first layer because it would cause a lot of issues and it would just run everywhere all over the trunk or whatever space you're painting with. So I'm just spritzing on the first coat in very light spritz, as you can see here. Nothing too crazy. Then after I'm done applying the first coat of primer, I let this dry for 10 to 15 minutes, or I think it was 10 to 20 minutes. But at least 15 minutes I let this dry. So I'm adding another coat of primer. This time I'm going a little heavier. And I'm still applying the primer in small spurts so it doesn't cause running or overspray. So in applying the last and final coat of primer, I'm just doing it as I have been with the other two layers, just light spritz, but I'm going a little heavier this time so I can completely get the primer added onto the trunk so it's ready for the base coat. Once the primer is finished drying for at least an hour, I go ahead and add the first coat of base coat, just adding light spritz of the base coat, making sure there's no overspray or runny paint, going nice and easy. Once I finish the first layer of base coat, I let the base coat dry for 15 minutes and then I'll move on to the next layer. Just applying this second layer of base coat. I'm adding a third coat, slightly heavier than the second coat. I'm adding a little more to the point where the paint is a little bit glossy. I'm adding the fourth coat of base coat now, and this time I'm going a little heavier to the point where the base coat is shimmering a little bit, but not enough where it's running and has overspray. And I also do this with the fifth coat of base coat. So in total there were 5 coats of base coat applied to the trunk. After applying base coat, this is what the finished product looks like. It's not the best, but it's better than what it did look like. Now the last and final step in this whole painting process is clear coat. I'm applying a very light coat of clear coat just as I did the primer and base coat. And the process is the same. You just add a very light coat at first and then a little heavier than the first and a little heavier than the second. The painting process is relatively easy, but I'm no painting expert or professional, so I'm just doing this for me to make those dents go away in the trunk. I'm happy with the finished result, and I don't care what anybody says, because I spent a lot of time trying to repair the dents out of this trunk, and I really don't care what anybody's opinions are. I'm just happy that the trunk looks relatively decent, and there is no longer any dents in the trunk, and I no longer feel sad or regretful anytime I look at the trunk and there's dents there, but there's no longer dents there, thinking of that person who hit my car and got away with it. And this, by the way, is the third and last layer of clear coat, if y'all weren't counting or paying attention listening to my rant. But after this coat of the clear coat, the painting process is completely done, and I will be showing y'all the finished product here in a second. Here is the finished result. 1 second later, just as I promised. I really want to appreciate y'all for watching this video, even though it was probably boring and a little bit too long. Hopefully this helps somebody that's in a situation that I was in. Also, I want to give a thanks for almost 500 subscribers. Really, guys, I really appreciate that. You guys are fantastic. I really appreciate y'all watching my videos. Stay awesome, and I will catch y'all on the next video.